What's up, my good people of the internet? I hope you all are having yourselves a fantastic day. We are draft happy over here, getting very involved in this 2022 NFL draft. I am so excited to be hanging out with you where sports meets that thing called life. We got the draft right behind me, and we are in the midst of the draft. We've been able to do some awesome things with Mike Sofka of Hall of Fame Fantasy Football.com. We had the opportunity of doing our 2022 NFL mock draft for round one. Mike Sofka gave his picks. I gave mine as well. You can go back and watch that video on youtube.com/wakeupcalldt and on facebook.com/wakeupcalldt, the two places where we are right now. You can also take the time to get yourself out there and watch our live draft cast on site, on location at Pizza Man Pub with Pitt Panther and national champion Al Romano, as well as Beeville Bills backers, big-time Buffalo Bills fan group in Baldwinsville, New York. Their president, Jeff Cook. Jeff, Al, and I got on the stage at Pizza Man Pub on 50 Oswego Street in Baldwinsville, New York, where we're happy to be every single month with you, with Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. We got out there and we had the opportunity to spend some time with you, and we went over all of our picks, who we thought was going to go where. So I talked about my picks, Al talked about his, and Jeff talked about his. We all had a discussion on who we thought was going to go to which place, and then within us doing our predictions, we also brought you the draft instantaneously in real time for round one. As we were watching it, we were discussing it, and we were ad-libbing, and as things were coming in, we were seeing who had the picks right. And we were also taking a look and saying, okay, well, if this is the person that's picked, based on where they're going, this is what we think is going to happen next. So we were doing so many different things to connect to the NFL draft. We were giving you our thoughts going into the draft. We were giving you our thoughts in real time of what the draft was doing and how we thought the draft would go. Go back and watch that video. And, of course, you can go and watch the video on Facebook at WakeUpCallDT, Twitter at CallDT, and Instagram at WakeUpCall_DT. to see Al Romano and I celebrate Kenny Pickett being the first quarterback off the board this year in the 2022 NFL Draft, as he made the decision, or they made the decision, I should say, the Pittsburgh Steelers, to keep him in Pittsburgh, where he trains. Obviously, they share a facility. You get to see him at the stadium. You know them very well. The Pitt Panthers and the Pittsburgh Steelers connected like this, and a few years ago, that bond brought James Conner to the Steelers at running back. Should have kept him there, in my opinion. And now Kenny Pickett went from the Pitt Panthers to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I got to celebrate that with Pitt Panther, always a Pitt Panther, and national champion Al Romano. So that was an awesome experience, and you can go back and watch that video on Facebook at WakeUpCallDT, Twitter at CallDT, and Instagram at WakeUpCall_DT. So a lot of ways to get involved with the draft, and of course, this is the final day of the draft. I am one of those people that watches the entire draft, round 1 through 7. I've been connecting with the picks all the way through, been trying to keep up on it and what's going on when I'm traveling, listening to it and trying to pick up different stuff that's happening. And then, of course, just watching it as much as possible and watching it right now as we're discussing it. So happy to be here with you, happy to be connecting with you where sports meets that thing called life, and would love to get your thoughts and see what you got, see what you're thinking about your team, about the draft itself, and just overall how you're taking in the draft. So I would love to get your take on it. And we welcome every fan of every one of the 32 teams. And, of course, I'm proud here on draft day. As a broadcaster, I'm impartial. And you say, well, Dan, how can you be impartial? You're wearing a Jaguars jersey. I didn't pick us to win every game, folks. I don't do that, right? I make honest assessments, and I thought the Jaguars would do better than they did this year, but I definitely didn't have them winning every game. I was hoping that they could get to 8 wins, 9 wins. They only got a few wins in this weird test that they had this year, with obviously something that didn't work out, bringing in a guy like Urban Meyer. But, that test is over, that time is over, and I'm happy now that we have the opportunity to look toward the future and look toward the future together. So really excited about it and excited about what's coming up here for the Jacksonville Jaguars, my team, and of course my second team, the Dallas Cowboys, and all of the 32 teams. And we're here to discuss them all. So just like you wear your jersey, I'm wearing mine. I want to say, as we're talking, the 9th player from the Cincinnati Bearcats has been drafted. Curtis Brooks, defensive tackle, picked by the Colts, 216th overall out of Cincinnati. I believe that it's a record on top of a record right now that we have 9 players that got drafted today. So this is just absolutely positively, or that got drafted overall. So this is incredibly amazing. I am so proud and happy for a team that I've covered closely for pretty much a decade now, and definitely all through the time that Luke Fickell has been there. So a big, big congratulations to the Cincinnati Bearcats. This has been an amazing season for their amazing draft for them. Amazing season and an amazing draft. So I'm really excited for them. I'm really happy for them, and I'm happy to be here with you. I'm happy to be hanging out where sports meets that thing called life. So weigh in, give us your thoughts, jump onto the live feed. This is an impromptu draft conversation, yet another draft cast that we have had this year where we have had more coverage of the draft than ever before. And that's because, listen, I love it. I'm excited, and I thought to myself, why not do another show? Why not put something else out there for the people? So I'm happy to be here with you. Utilize it, and let's have some fun with it, and let's enjoy this draft together. I love the opportunity to talk with you on it. So we'll get to the first overall pick, Travon Walker. I thought, the safer bet was for the Jaguars to go after Aiden Hutchinson. And I said, if they don't go after Aiden Hutchinson, watch how quickly this pick comes in from the Detroit Lions. And that pick came in so incredibly fast. It was laughable that I said it was going to be that fast and how fast it actually came in. So it's insane how quickly it all came in, and here we are right now, right, in Aiden Hutchinson's second overall pick. The Lions are actually picking while we speak at 217 overall, so it'll be interesting to see who they take at this point as they have a bunch of needs. They definitely have had a bunch of running backs lately, and really nothing has panned out, so hopefully they'll make another move at running back. I would imagine that it would behoove them to do something in that respect to make a move there and see what they could do with that. But a lot of great things that are going on in the draft. Would love for you to weigh in and give your thoughts, and would love for you to be a part of the show. So make sure that you speak with us as we go on here and give our thoughts on the draft. And definitely, like I said, getting back to the number 1 pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars, listen, they went defensive end. They had to do that, in my opinion. You got to be a team. You went after your quarterback last year, and now it's time for you to, figure out how you're going to attack the quarterback on the other side of it. You went offense, and then you had to go defensive line because you had a bunch of guys that are already there on the offensive line for you. I could have seen them going Evan Neal. I know some other people had said that, but it was time for them to get a defensive player to really spark this defense, right? You got some talent out there. You got Josh Allen. Dwan Smoots worked his way up from a 4th-round pick out of Illinois a few seasons ago, and they gave him an extension and an opportunity to stay in Jacksonville. So I'm hoping that pans out. Josh Allen, like I said, that's helped them out. So you needed somebody else defensively to be a spark for this team. And I'm hoping that now they have that. I'm hoping that, things will start to pan out for them there. So I'm okay with the pick. I'm good with the pick. I ultimately, like I said, I thought that they were going to go in the direction of Aiden Hutchinson, but now that this is their guy, I want to see what he can do. I want to see what he brings to the table, and I'm excited to watch the maturation process of Travon Walker and to see what's going to go on with him. We've done a lot with the first round, so I want to jump into the other rounds that we've seen. I really want to go team by team right now. We'll start in alphabetical order with the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals, their highest pick that they had in this year's draft, they're one of the teams that did not draft in the first round, so their highest pick was in the second round, and that was Colorado State tight end Trey McBride. So they bring in a tight end, Arizona. This makes sense, right? They parted ways with Dan Arnold last year when they made the trade with the Jaguars or pardon me, that was Carolina. My bad on that. So Arizona really hasn't had a tight end that they can lean on. They haven't really had a guy that they've been able to stick with, and really nobody in fantasy football that I've been able to tell you is someone that you should put out there every single week. They've kind of had this round robin, and really nobody shaping out to be that pass-catching tight end. So hopefully Trey McBride out of Colorado State can help them do that. From there, Arizona went for Cameron Thomas, a defensive end out of San Diego State, and then Majai Sanders, one of those 9 players drafted from Cincinnati for the Bearcats. So they went 2 DNs in the 3rd round. And so that says something right there, right? In the 3rd round, they go DNs back-to-back, and then they went running back Keontae Ingram out of USC. There's some sense here, right? You know, they've tried different people in Arizona, so it does make sense to bring in somebody else. And then Lycidas Smith out of Virginia Tech, offensive guard. You got to protect Kyler Murray. You got to do, right by him. So I think giving him a weapon in Trey McBride hopefully will help them out there. And we'll see what can happen from here. But going defensive line and edge rushers as well as tight end, I can understand that with Arizona because you got to be able to stop those quarterbacks in your division. If Trey Lance really is the guy in San Francisco, and then with the Rams, Matt Stafford's had a lot of success winning a Super Bowl in his first season there. And then, in Seattle, it's a question mark. So Arizona, you got to be ferocious, right? You got to get after it. And they don't have Chandler Jones anymore. And that was a big help for them. I think he had 6 sacks, 5 or 6 sacks in the opening game. Some people don't have 6 sacks a season, and he had 5 or 6 in the opening game. So Arizona definitely has to get after that. Atlanta needed everything. Atlanta needed all the help that they can get. You know that. I know that from our conversation about it. Atlanta really needed help everywhere, and so I'm happy that they are out there attempting to address that right now. And hopefully they'll be able to get better this season. And the question was, who's their quarterback going to be? And I'll get to that in a second because I think they made a really good move to get a good quarterback here and potentially a steal in the draft, which I'm excited to talk about and to discuss. I mean, I think that ultimately this is shaping out to be a pretty good draft for the Atlanta Falcons, who went with the guy that I thought they would go with, Drake London. Got to give credit to Mike Sofka because he put him on my radar here. And thanks to Monster and Rain for all you do. A lot of drafts, a lot of hours, and Monster definitely helps out. And this is the Ultra Peachy Keen. I'm a big fan of this one. I didn't know if I would like it because there's certain ones that are my go-tos, but I really like the Peachy Keen, and it seems like it's more smooth. So a big fan of that. Drake London coming onto the team, a wide receiver for them, and then they went with an Arnold Ebiketie out of Penn State, defensive end. They went Troy Anderson out of Montana State at inside linebacker. They need a lot of help on defense. You're in the same division as Tom Brady and all those weapons. And I'll get back to the quarterback in a second. D'Angelo Malone, outside linebacker, Western Kentucky. Tyler Algier, BYU running back, not too shabby there. I think he had 1,000 yards rushing this season. Justin Schaefer out of Georgia, offensive guard. John Fitzpatrick at Georgia, tight end. And Georgia with a ton of players going in this year's draft. So, excited to see that. But let's go to the 2 players offensively that'll try and help this offense to grow and expand and hopefully bring something to the table for these Atlanta Falcons. And, that's Drake London at wide receiver and their quarterback, Desmond Ridder. Now, mind you, folks, Desmond Ridder, I feel like people weren't really high on him, and there wasn't a lot of love for him. There was love coming through my camp, but there wasn't a lot of love that was, that I was seeing for Desmond Ridder. And to me, that was frustrating. It was upsetting to see a level of disrespect for Desmond Ridder, right? But I thought, hey, if he's a guy that not many people are giving a lot of respect to, he has a benefit because he's in this year's draft. And in this year's draft, you're in a situation where there's, not a lot of quarterbacks that are being spoken about. So if you're in a draft that isn't quarterback heavy, then I thought, this is a good chance for him to not be left by the wayside, maybe go undrafted and maybe have to make a team in free agency because of this draft. I think it helped his stock to rise. I think his numbers have been strong. I shared his numbers on social media, But, for those people that wanted to count him out, I think, this draft helped him out because there was really 4 to 6 quarterbacks that I thought, would really be the guys of, to note that could be taken in this year's go around. And so, not a ton of guys, in my opinion, that were going to get drafted here at quarterback. And so that could potentially, be somebody that could step in at some point soon or be the future of the franchise. I didn't see that happening outside of really 5 or 6 of these guys. So with that being said, Desmond Ridder was one of them. And like I said, being in a draft that wasn't as quarterback heavy could have definitely helped him out and helped out the fact that, he could get on a team and showcase himself, because I didn't think that he was getting the respect that he deserved. And he ends up being the second quarterback chosen behind Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett was the only quarterback in the first round, fittingly going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, as Al Romano and I thought he would. And so I'm really happy to see that he went to the Pittsburgh Steelers and he gets to stay in Pitt. And then to see Desmond Ridder go second. Everybody was thinking Malik Willis. Would Malik Willis go high? Would Malik Willis be one of the top 10 picks, a top 20 pick? Would he go ahead of Khalil Davis, who I had the opportunity of interviewing out of UCF, just went to the 49ers at D tackle, build some depth there for their defensive line and defense as a whole. So shout out to D tackle out of UCF, Davis. Happy for you, and definitely happy that I had the opportunity to speak with you. So, being in this year's draft, I think definitely helped Desmond Ridder, but his numbers really aren't that bad. And I think, you put his numbers up against Matt Corral, they're better. You put his numbers up against Malik Davis, they're better. And I think that's what ultimately helped him get drafted, is because, his numbers were better than the other guys out there, including, or I said Malik Davis, Malik Willis. And, they were better than Malik Willis of Liberty. And so I think that helped him to get drafted. And I think, when you look at his numbers, when you look at the fact that this wasn't a deep draft at quarterbacks, it put him in a place where I felt like he was going to get a chance. And not only did he get a chance, I thought he could go to the Falcons. The Falcons were a team that made sense to me. The Seahawks made sense to me. There were certain teams out there that I thought he could definitely go to and fit. And the Falcons really were, when that pick happened, I thought this is a really good pick for both parties. And I'm definitely down with it and I'm cool with it. And so I'm happy for Desmond Ridder to take a look back at his numbers and how, he did collegiately. He spent 4 seasons playing for the Cincinnati Bearcats. And in 4 seasons with the Bearcats, this is what, this is what his numbers look like with the Bearcats. So I'm happy to tell you this right now. 2018 for Desmond Ridder, 62.4% completion percentage, 2,445 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. 2019, 55.1% completion percentage, 2,164 yards, 18 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Then he went up by 11+% in completion percentage from 55.1 to 66.2 in 2020. 2,296 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. 2021, 64.9% completion percentage, 3,334 yards, 30 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. So what I look at that stands out to me here is 3 out of 4 seasons, he had a 62% or better completion percentage. His 2 most recent seasons, almost 65% as well as 66%. And that he has never had a single season of double-digit interceptions, 5, 9, 6, and 8. So those stick out to me because, listen, they played up against Georgia. They played up against, Notre Dame. It's not like they didn't play talent that could pick that ball off. It's not like they weren't playing those really strong teams out there. So I give them a lot of credit, and I'm definitely excited for what we've seen come out of the Atlanta Falcons. I think they have a quarterback that can come in and play for them, hopefully within the first couple seasons. And Drake London, obviously he's got to play right away so Kyle Pitts can have somebody on the other end. For the Baltimore Ravens, I'm a big fan of this pick. Speaking of Notre Dame, they went out there and Monterica Brown from Arkansas, corner, just got picked for the Jaguars, who continue to build depth in their secondary over these last few seasons. in the draft. And listen, they drafted guys like C.J. Henderson high out of Florida, I think number 9th overall. It didn't work out. He was injured the first year, and then they got rid of him the next year. And so now building that depth can't hurt you. Guys like Trey Herndon have filled in over the last couple of years, and they've done it pretty well. And Andre Cisco from Syracuse at safety, he's going into his second season. He got some action out there last year, so I'm excited to see what he brings to the table with this now. So taking a look at the Baltimore Ravens and how their draft has gone, they go with safety Kyle Hamilton in the first round, 14th overall out of Notre Dame. Love that pick. Tyler Linderbaum, I thought that he potentially could go in the first round. He did. The Ravens traded back into the first round, took the center out of Iowa to protect Lamar Jackson and that rushing attack. David Ojabo went to the he went from Michigan outside linebacker to the Ravens in the second round, and then UConn's Travis Jones. Listen, no matter how bad UConn has been on the field record-wise over the years, and being an independent team now since leaving the American Athletic, which I think was a mistake, they still send guys to the NFL. They sent Fatu Melifonwu's brother Obi back a few years. He went to the Raiders high, and so big shout out to Obi Melifonwu and now Travis Jones, defensive tackle out of UConn. Just goes to show it doesn't matter where you play, doesn't matter the record. If you're talented, and you'll get an opportunity. More often than not. Daniel Falil out of Minnesota, offensive tackle, went to Baltimore to help them out with depth at the line. Jalen Armour Davis out of Alabama at corner went in the fourth round of them. In the fourth round, the Baltimore Ravens had 6 picks of the fourth round. 6 picks in the fourth round. They got Daniel out of Minnesota, offensive tackle, Jalen, cornerback out of Alabama. Then they got Charlie Kolar out of Iowa State at tight end. They got Jordan Stout, Penn State punter, in the fourth round, which I would imagine means he's vying for that job. Then they got another tight end out of Coastal Carolina, Isaiah Likely, in the fourth round. And then they got Demarion Williams out of Houston, another team that I cover in the American Athletic very closely, a corner in the fourth round out of Houston, going to the Baltimore Ravens. And then they got running back Tyler Batty out of Missouri, running back in the 6th round. So that's what the Ravens picks look like right now, as Ravens head coach John Harbaugh has been on the NFL Draftcast talking on ESPN and giving some thoughts. 2 tight ends going to the Baltimore Ravens. Why? Well, in the words of my girlfriend, she said they're a rushing attack team, so they need to have those tight ends. They need to have those extra blockers out there, and she's 100% correct in my opinion. So good to see them doing their thing and getting out there and getting after it for the Baltimore Ravens, trying to build depth in their secondary and trying to obviously get some more guys on that offensive line. And on top of all of that, also trying to help themselves out at tight end to have those extra blockers out there. So Baltimore definitely looking like that team that is still very much committed to the run, which you expect with Lamar Jackson being their quarterback. So we'll see how it goes from here, but they've definitely spent the time to get offensive linemen as well as to make sure they get their tight ends. The Buffalo Bills, Kaiir Elam, they traded up in the draft here a couple picks, thinking that maybe Elam wasn't going to be there. Out of Florida, I had him going in the later part of the second round, so I'm not surprised here as he went to the Buffalo Bills to help them out against the passing attack. And then I thought they needed a running back. I thought they were going to go 25th overall is what they originally had, and I thought they were going to utilize that pick on Breece Hall, and they did it. Breece ended up going on day 2, and so with Breece going on day 2, the question is, where were they going to go? Were they going to go and, in fact, get their running back still? And they did. They did go out and get their running back, and we saw in the second round for the Bills, they went and got James Cook, younger brother of Dalvin Cook, who went to FSU and plays for Minnesota for the Vikings. James Cook, who I covered. You can watch my video interview with him on wakeupcalldt.com's homepage as you see that plethora, that cornucopia collage of videos, which is a small, tiny fraction of what we have for you on youtube.com/wakeupcalldt, which I think has over 2,000 shows on there right now. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/wakeupcalldt. So, I mean, yeah, James Cook going there. I thought they definitely need to get a running back, potentially a steal for them there in the second round. James Cook getting out there from Georgia, winning a championship, and now going to the Bills, who need help in their backfield with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss having really panned out right now. Hopefully, those guys can continue to work at it. I never wish bad on anyone, so I hope that they can get better here and still find a way to excel. And James Cook definitely has a chance to start right away. Out of Baylor in the third round, they went with Terrell Bernard out of Baylor, inside linebacker. In the fifth round, they went with Khalil Shakir, wide receiver out of Boise State. Good help for them, some depth at wide receiver. Matt Ariaza, punter out of San Diego State, the first pick of the sixth round. I can imagine he's going to vie for the job. And then Christian Benford, Villanova corner, not even a FBS school. That's an FCS school in Villanova. So big again, they'll find the talent. They'll find those guys. Villanova played Syracuse a few seasons back, and Syracuse had to go to overtime to beat them in the Dome. So shout out to Villanova for their corner. And then Luke Tenuta out of Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech players getting drafted late, but still there, offensive tackle to try and help them out and give somebody to, make things interesting in camp, I would imagine. For the Carolina Panthers, they got Ike Ekwonu. I got to listen to Dave Doran at length yesterday on NFL Radio on SiriusXM when I was traveling. I want to thank SiriusXM and NFL Radio for spending some time with Dave Doran and with NC State. They definitely deserve the plug. They deserve the love, and it was an extensive interview. So not only am I happy that NC State got a spotlight, I'm happy that Dave Doran got a spotlight, and I'm happy that it wasn't a couple minutes. Dave Doran got a lot of time on there, and I listened for a really long time to it. So shout out to NFL Radio for that. Ike Ekwonu going to them to help out their offensive line right away in Carolina. Whoever their quarterback is going to be, good for him to be there. And then speaking of quarterback, they traded up in the third round to get Matt Corral out of Ole Miss, the quarterback there. And Matt Corral, taking a look at his numbers in college, like I said, Desmond Ritter's numbers looking better to me. Matt Corral's numbers in college, 2018, he only attempted 22 passes and had 2 rushing touchdowns. In 2019, he had a 59% completion percentage, over 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 picks, and 1 rushing touchdown. And then in 2020 and 2021, we really saw Matt Corral step it up. He had 70.9% completion percentage in 2020, and in 2021 had almost 68% completion percentage, over 3,300 yards in both of the last 2 seasons, 29 touchdowns, 14 interceptions in 2020, 20-5 in 2021, and he ran the ball. Mind you, Matt Corral can run this rock. 112 carries, 506 yards, 4.5 yards a carry, 4 rushing touchdowns in 2020 for Ole Miss. And in 2021, inside of the SEC, he had 152 carries for the Lane Train, 614 yards, 4 yards per carry, and 11 rushing touchdowns. So really cool to see him there and see that he had 31 touchdowns total, 5 interceptions in this past season for Matt Corral. So a big shout out to Matt Corral, whose numbers are not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I wanted to, really sell Desmond Ridder because I thought he deserved it, and that's not to take away from Matt Corral by any stretch of the imagination. So I think Matt Corral could get it. Hopefully Sam Darnold stays healthy, and then if he does, I think Matt Corral could be playing in a couple seasons. If not, he may have to step in for a couple games. We'll see. The guy who I was the best man at his wedding, Brandon Smith, another Brandon Smith got drafted in the 4th round out of Carolina, out of Penn State, inside linebacker Brandon Smith. And then Amari Barno, who we kept hearing about over and over again. He was on Mel Kiper's best available for a while. Another guy out of Virginia Tech. A lot of these V-Tech Hokies going late. 6th round outside linebacker going to Carolina. And then Cade Mays out of Tennessee, an offensive guard. So they went linebacker, quarterback, and offensive line for the Carolina Panthers. I can understand it. The Chicago Bears, they needed a little bit of everything. Their first pick didn't come until the 2nd round. They went with Kyler Gordon out of Washington at corner. Then they went safety Jaquan Brisker out of Penn State. They're trying to shore up that secondary because they're in the same division as Kirk Cousins, who's a serviceable quarterback. And then they're also there with Aaron Rodgers with the Packers, who is an every season potential MVP. Velus Jones Jr. out of Tennessee, wide receiver going to Chicago. They just lost Allen Robinson, and they've had a tough go at it at receiver. Really, nobody's been their number one stud for the past few years. And Allen Robinson's numbers were good. I mean, he played with, three quarterbacks a season, and his numbers were better than I thought they were. But, they still need the help right now to see what they can do here and need some guys to step up. Braxton Jones, offensive tackle out of Southern Utah for Chicago, here to help out their line. Dominique, and that was the 5th round. Velus Jones was in the 3rd. Also in the 5th round, Dominique Robinson, Miami of Ohio, outside linebacker. Zach Thomas, San Diego State. I remember the Zach Thomas linebacker from Miami, and when he retired, that team was rebuilding. Him, Jason Taylor, and Dan Marino all leaving the Dolphins to, finish up their careers pretty much. And that was the last time the Dolphins were good. And Zach Thomas, 6th round, San Diego State, O-tackle. So 2 offensive tackles in the late rounds for Chicago. And then they went with Treston Ebner out of Baylor, the running back. And, they need some help at running back. And Doug Kramer here out of Illinois at center, another offensive lineman for Chicago. Definitely wants to get that depth. And in round number 7, Jatir Carter, offensive guard out of Southern. So we saw Chicago, they used to have a mean old defense, went a lot of offensive linemen in this draft here. The Bengals, late in the draft, a 31 out of 32 picks, second to last pick of the first round, went Daxton Hill. I thought he was going to go late at pick 30 to Kansas City, and he just went 1 pick later, so around the same time that I thought. Cam Taylor-Britt went to the runner-up in the Super Bowl and the top team in the AFC this past year. Joe Burrow in year number 2 brought the team to the Super Bowl with all of their fantastic players. Cam Taylor-Britt is looking to help out their secondary at safety out of Nebraska. And then Zach Carter out of Florida, defensive tackle, help out their defense. And they went Cordell, and that was 3rd round. Cordell Volson, 4th rounder out of North Dakota State to help out their offensive line. I thought they would do more to protect their quarterback, but they brought in Alex Kappa, remember, a guard from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so maybe they thought they had enough. And then Tyson Anderson out of Toledo, the safety. So we saw the Cincinnati Bengals in this draft go safety, 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 D-tackle, offensive tackle. You can tell that they're trying to get that defense stronger because they thought that that was ultimately what they needed when they did not stop the Rams in the Super Bowl. And then we take a look at the Cleveland Browns. They didn't have their first pick of this draft until the 3rd round. A lot of people focusing on the multiple teams that never picked in the first round. The Cleveland Browns, who I think need a lot of help, they didn't pick in the first round or the second round. They saw 64 picks in those first 2 rounds go before they drafted, and then they had to watch 3 picks go in the 3rd round. So they did not pick until 67 picks went ahead of them. They got Martin Emerson, corner out of Mississippi State, and then they went with Alex Wright, defensive end out of UAB. Again, going defense here in the 3rd round. David Bell out of Purdue, wide receiver, 3rd round. Odell's not there anymore. Jarvis Landry isn't there anymore. There's a bunch of non-household names that are there. David Bell could go from nothing to a starter at the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. We could see that happening. And then Perion Winfrey out of Oklahoma. They went defense again, defensive tackle. And you can tell the Browns don't trust in their kicker. In the 4th round, they went with Cade York out of LSU. And then they went with one of my guys out of Cincinnati who came from Bama-Lama, transferred to Cincinnati, and then went up against Alabama in the college football playoff. That's running back Jerome Ford, who's a freaking beast. And I don't really know why Cleveland did this. They have Kareem Hunt. They already have Nick Chubb, and now they have Jerome Ford. So the rich got richer at running back. And then Michael Woods, the 2nd wide receiver out of Oklahoma in the 6th round. So that could be a steal for them. David Bell and Michael Woods could both get out there and start for this team who needs help. And then you have Isaiah Thomas out of Oklahoma, defensive end. So 3 Oklahoma players are going to stay teammates in Cleveland, all drafted by the Browns this year. Perion Winfrey, Michael Woods II, and Isaiah Thomas get to all remain together on the same team in Cleveland. So they get to, obviously experience the NFL and it's, as one, which could definitely help in reality. I mean, you can't understate how this could really help the Browns because these guys are already comfortable with each other and it can help them get acclimated to the NFL. It's like going to college but already knowing your roommate. So it's a good thing there. I like that. And I can understand a lot of defense for Cleveland. And at the same time, I can understand them wanting to get more weapons. And I think they got a steal with Jerome Ford. I really do. And I thought he might slip in the draft. I was hoping that he wouldn't. But, shout out to the Browns for going and getting him. So much respect to them going out and doing something like that. I can definitely see the importance of that. And so beyond that, we take a look at, if you're here with us on the live draft cast, this is Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, talking about all 32 teams examining the draft and not leaving a single team or fan base out of it. The Dallas Cowboys first round pick, 24th overall, they went with Tyler Smith. They were, and I love this pick out of Tulsa. I love Philip Montgomery. Put out a nice message here, which was really awesome, and I love what he had to say here. A big fan of it, and I'm just definitely a big fan of Tyler Smith, and a big fan of Philip Montgomery and this team. So, I've definitely been following Tulsa. You can see my end of the year conversation with Philip Montgomery on youtube.com/wakeupcalldt, and I'll share that again. Tyler Smith going to the draft here and being a first-round pick out of Tulsa, yet another American Athletic Conference player, another AAC guy getting drafted high. This conference is way undervalued, but thankfully the NFL teams don't undervalue it as much as the media does. Second round, they went with Sam Williams out of Ole Miss to the Cowboys, outside linebacker. They went with Jalen Tolbert, wide receiver out of South Alabama, after losing Amari Cooper here, and to some moves being made in the offseason. In third round, I thought Amari Cooper found a resurgence of his career in Dallas, so I'm surprised that he got moved. I thought that him and CeeDee Lamb would stay. And if anything, that they, would look to move Michael Gallup, but they draft Jalen Tolbert after Amari Cooper goes away. Jake Ferguson, again, the tight end situation in Dallas has not been clear. I think Dalton Schultz had his best fantasy season and had some relevancy this year in fantasy, but in the fourth round, they thought Jake Ferguson would be good for them. Also helped them run the ball. They got a couple guys running the ball right now in Dallas. Of course, they have Zeke Elliott, and so they'll see what he can do. But, the Dallas Cowboys also have another guy in their backfield out of Memphis. And that player out of Memphis that they have running the ball that I got to cover, Tony Pollard, he definitely stepped it up. And don't be surprised if he might take that job away from Zeke. Maybe, more often than not. Maybe someday permanently, especially if he costs less to the Cowboys. Matt Waletzko out of North Dakota, they got an offensive tackle there, so they got some help on the offensive line. So they got two O tackles here at Dallas in the first 5 rounds. Then they went corner, Deron Bland out of Fresno State, and inside linebacker, Damone Clark out of LSU in the 5th round as well. And then in the 5th round, they had a bunch of picks in the 5th round. The Cowboys did. They had 4 picks in the 5th round. They went with John Ridgeway, D-tackle out of Arkansas. And then out of Oklahoma State, they went inside linebacker Devin Harper, who could end up being a steal for them as well. Devin Harper coming on to this squad. So we could see what the Dallas Cowboys end up doing with Devin Harper here if he is able to make the team. And another guy that, like I said, could be a steal in this draft coming out of Oklahoma State. And taking a look, he played 5 seasons at Oklahoma State, took advantage of the extra bonus year from COVID. And so we look at, what he's done. He had 32 tackles in 2018, played sparingly in 2017, had 5 tackles. He had 44 tackles in 2018, 34, 37, and 95 in 2021. Definitely stepped it up. 11 tackles for a loss this past season. So big shout out to him for that. Couple interceptions on his career as well. So some good stuff coming from him there. 13.5 sacks, which is less than what Aiden Hutchinson had last year alone. Aiden Hutchinson on Michigan had 14 sacks, but 13.5 sacks for Devin Harper. And again, they're playing different positions. Aiden on the line as an edge rusher, and you have an inside linebacker for the Cowboys in Devin Harper out of Oklahoma State, who had 5 sacks, 5.5, and pardon me, his tackles for a loss. His sacks, he had 2.5, 3, 2, and 6. So not too shabby. Like I said, could be a steal for the Cowboys here late in the draft in round number 6. So a shout out to him for that and the Cowboys for taking a chance. Love the Tyler Smith thing. Can't wait to see him be, a 10-year, 12-year vet, hopefully, maybe longer for the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL. And then Nick Bonito. This is fun because I know a Nick Monito in Florida. Shout out to him in our fantasy football league. But Nick Bonito, a second round, is the first pick that the Broncos had, and new head coach and one of my good friends, Nate Hackett. Nick Bonito, in outside linebacker out of Oklahoma, going to the Broncos, looking to help out their defense as they have so many weapons on offense. They just brought back Melvin Gordon III right before the draft.
Like the taste of fresh apples?
Right before the draft here, they bring him back here. And so bringing back Melvin Gordon III, having Javonte Williams in the backfield, having Cortland Sutton at receiver, a guy I covered at SMU, Jerry Jeudy coming in as well. They got Mike Boone out of Cincinnati that I covered as well. And so and Javonte Williams I covered out of North Carolina. So a lot of players, a lot of weapons, a lot of guys that I've covered. Talking about the Denver Broncos. Oh, and then they have this guy called Russ the Bus, Russell Wilson, as their quarterback. So makes sense that the first pick they had, which is in the bottom half of the second round, that they went to outside linebacker there out of Oklahoma. Then they went tight end in the third round. This makes sense because they haven't had a true tight end in a while. Greg Dulcich out of UCLA. And then they went Damari Mathis. Happy for Pat Narduzzi. Shout out to Doozer. Pitt here in the fourth round. Dulcich went third round. Corner out of Pittsburgh, Damari Mathis, going in the fourth round to Denver. Then they went with Ioma Uwazurike out of Iowa State, D-end. Then they went Delarin Turnell Yell out of Oklahoma, a safety. Montreal Washington out of Samford at wide receiver. Mind you, Samford pushed the Florida Gators this year to the brink of losing. It was a shootout. I think it got into definitely the 40s, if not the 50s. And then they took out of Washington Luke Wattenberg, center, in the fifth round, going to the Broncos. The Broncos had 3 picks in the fifth round. And then in the sixth round, Matt Henningsen out of Wisconsin and his teammate Faion Hicks in the seventh round. So Denver's keeping 2 Wisconsin guys together, bringing them in, 2 Oklahoma guys together as well. And Matt Henningsen, a D-tackle, Faion Hicks, a cornerback. So we saw Denver go defense, and a majority of their picks being defense. And then they went tight end, wide receiver, and center. So the majority of their picks leaning on the defensive side, like I said, makes sense with all the weapons they have. Detroit feels like they got the number 1 pick, in my opinion, as they went with Aiden Hutchinson, second overall out of Michigan. They keep him in the state of Michigan. Then in the first round, they traded up from 32 to 2 to get Jameson Williams. So they definitely think that they'll be able to get the ball out to him. I'm really surprised they didn't go quarterback. I thought the Jared Goff trade, when they let go of Matt Stafford, I think the Rams won because the Rams got Stafford, and I think the Lions won because they got a bunch of draft capital if Jared Goff didn't work out, former number 1 overall pick. And Jared Goff really didn't pan out. So I thought, okay, well, he didn't work out. They tried him for a season. They got all this draft capital. They'll go get a quarterback, but maybe they're thinking next year they're going to try out Goff again from what I see, and they'll try and hope that he can get things out to the speedster, Jameson Williams, who runs a 4.25 40. Got him out of Alabama. There was a massive run on receivers. The Lions definitely picked this off right by jumping up to 12 and taking him away from teams like the Green Bay Packers in their division. Josh Pascal out of Kentucky, second round D end. I can understand that pick because Detroit's defense is not scary. They went with Kirby Joseph out of Illinois in the third round. Safety, I get that too. Yet again, fifth and sixth round seem to be where the hay was made for Virginia Tech. Their James Mitchell tight end went then. And then we have Malcolm Rodriguez out of Oklahoma State, inside linebacker, going in the sixth round to Detroit. And James Houston, the fourth, out of Jackson State, going to outside linebacker there, going to the Detroit Lions. So definitely can appreciate that as well. And happy to see that Jackson State, again, is a team that is coached by Deion Sanders. So Deion Sanders can boast of a pick there with James Houston, the fourth, going in the sixth round to the Detroit Lions. If you're just tuning in to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, this is a bonus broadcast. We come to you live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time, where sports meets that thing called life. On YouTube.com, Facebook.com, and MixLR.com, all / Wake Up Call DT. On Facebook.com / LiveNowDT, and on WakeUpCallDT.com's homepage, so you can get us Monday through Friday in our normally scheduled time. So make sure you check us out there, and definitely go and see the show and listen to the show worldwide. And then you can get us in our archive: Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, Podbean, iHeart, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, MixLR, and now on Audible. You can also see us there, and on Amazon Music, you can check us out by searching Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, or one word, Wake Up Call DT. So we definitely appreciate y'all folks for being here. Want to give a special thanks to all of our awesome partners in Central and Upstate New York and beyond. To Cafe Cubal, Carvel DeWitt, the Wildcat Sports Pub, PB&J's Lunchbox, Canine Camp Dog Daycare, Avicoli's Canine Campground Dog Boarding, Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory. Go to Ma and Pa's Popcorn.com anywhere in the United States, and they'll deliver right to your house. Honda City of Liverpool, Millhouse Market, Victory Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, Pizza Man, Chick-fil-A Cicero and Chick-fil-A Clay, Mother's Cupboard, and you know that Wake Up Call is the proud multimedia marketing partner exclusively of the Lemoyne College Dolphins, Marywood University Pacers, and the Bryan and Stratton College Bobcats of Syracuse. So make sure you check us out there, where sports meets that thing called life. And looking at the Green Bay Packers, as Wake Up Call brings you a bonus live draft cast base, because I love you all and I appreciate and respect you all for supporting Wake Up Call and for being a part of the show. In the first round, the Green Bay Packers spent their 22nd pick on Quay Walker, inside linebacker out of Georgia. And then they went at 28 and kept that pick. Devontae Wyatt out of Georgia, D tackle, kept two defensive guys from Georgia, from the national championship college football playoff team, and brought them to Green Bay, thinking that that'll help out their non-scary defense. But they didn't go wide receiver in the first round, which I thought they would go 28th overall. They didn't, but they got the second pick of the second round, which ended up being 36th overall, and they drafted exactly who I thought they would get at the end of the first round. Christian Watson, hailing from Tampa, Florida, and playing for North Dakota State. That wide receiver going to the Packers, who is exactly who I thought that they would pick. Then Sean Ryan out of UCLA, offensive guard, in the third round to protect Aaron Rodgers. Romeo Dubes out of Nevada, wide receiver. So they did go late wide receiver here, thinking that maybe he can make the team. Alan Lazard made him on the practice squad from Jacksonville, so that works. Zach Tom out of Wake Forest, another team I cover. Offensive guard in the fourth round. In the fifth round, there's two Kingsleys in the draft. The Kingsley from South Carolina went. Kingsley and Agbear went to the outside linebacker, went to the Packers out of South Carolina in the fifth round. Tariq Carpenter out of Georgia Tech, inside linebacker in the seventh round. And Jonathan Ford in the seventh round out of Miami, D tackle. The Packers going heavily on defense, and a couple wide receivers here and a couple offensive guards. They have 4 picks in the seventh round, and they still have a couple picks up at the time that we're talking. Next team to take a look at, the Houston Texans needed everything. And Al Romano, our co-host for round 1 at Pizza Man Pub, in our live Off the Rails with Al version of Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, with Al Romano and Jeff Cook, the president of the Beeville Bills backers. We saw Al was totally correct. I thought Derek Stingley Jr. would go to the Legion of Boom, round 2 in Seattle, but he ended up going early, 3rd pick overall to Houston. LSU corner going to them, and Derek Stingley, his father, also played in the NFL. Kenyon Green also went to the Houston Texans, who had the 13th pick overall and traded down to 15. Got Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M, offensive guard, to protect, which looks like, I would guess, to be Davis Mills at this point, because he was their 3rd-round pick at quarterback, and they don't have anybody else that I would think is going to start. Jalen Petrie out of Baylor, safety in the 2nd round. Then they went back-to-back Alabama teammates, John Mechie III, a wide receiver potential steal in round number 2, as they don't have any receivers to call home about, and Christian Harris, an inside linebacker that can help them out on defense. And they went Dameon Pierce out of Florida, a running back that Mike Sofka and I talked about from his Gators, from Brendan Murphy's Gators, and Papa Joe's Gators. That could be a steal in round number 4, as they don't have a running back of merit in the backfield. They had 3 or 4 guys that were guys you knew, but a bunch of veterans that were kind of going off to pasture there with one last leg potentially. And I hope they all find footing somewhere in the NFL. Hopefully things will work out for them. Thomas Booker in round 5 out of Stanford, D tackle. And then Tegan Quintoriano out of Oregon State. I like that name. Tight end in the 5th round. And Austin, I want to call him Austin Delicious out of LSU, but it's Austin Deculus, offensive tackle. So the first pick by the Texans in this draft was from LSU. Their last pick was from LSU. 2 Alabama teammates, 2 LSU teammates, and a Texas A&M player and a Florida player means that the Houston Texans think in their rebuild, well, and really maybe their build, because they haven't had a lot going on in a while here, they are leaning on the SEC, which isn't a shabby place to lean on, in order to make their team better. Next team up to talk about here, the Indianapolis Colts, and they drafted high for this guy. I'm very excited here. Round number 2, Cincinnati wide receiver Alec Pierce, the Cincinnati Bearcats, getting a bunch of players drafted in this year's draft. This was the 2nd Cincinnati player to come off the board of 9, I believe. And then they got in the 3rd round, their next pick was for Jelani Woods out of Virginia at tight end. And then Bernhard Raymond out of Central Michigan, offensive tackle, in the 3rd round could be a steal for them as well for the Colts. Nick Cross out of Maryland at safety in the 3rd round. In the 5th round, Eric Johnson, Missouri State D tackle. And then Andrew Ogletree out of Youngstown State, another tight end. In the 6th round could be to block and help them out there. And Curtis Brooks out of Cincinnati, giving 2 Cincinnati teammates the opportunity to play together. 6th round, the Colts high on Cincinnati, drafting a D tackle, Curtis Brooks, and drafting a wide receiver, Alec Pierce. And as high as they drafted Alec Pierce, it looks like the Colts are looking for him to be the future, and Matt Ryan is the present quarterback to throw to him for hopefully a couple more seasons. My Jacksonville Jaguars drafted Trayvon Walker, defensive end out of Georgia. I'm hoping he has tremendous upside here and hopefully more growth to have and some good things to bring. Hey, listen, I thought Aiden Hutchinson had the home run swing. Trayvon Walker's numbers weren't that high, but he played 3 different positions. D tackle, defensive end, and linebacker. I'm hoping that that'll help out the Jaguars, who need help everywhere to bring some fear to their defensive opportunities out there to get that defense to do what they need to do to keep Trevor Lawrence and company out there as many times as possible to score. Then they traded back in to the 1st round. They had the 33rd pick. They didn't think it was good enough, so they went 6 higher and traded with the Bucks, also in the great state of Florida, in the second home of Wake Up Call, to get Devin Lloyd out of Utah, inside linebacker, who I had as my first linebacker off the list. And then they went and got Chad Muma in the 3rd round, another linebacker out of Wyoming, another inside guy. And in between those linebackers, they got Luke Fortner out of Kentucky at center in the 1st pick of the 3rd round. And I think with Luke Fortner having played center and guard, you get Brandon Sheriff, who is a right guard out of the Washington Commanders. You have Cam Robinson, who you just extended 3 years, $54 million at left tackle. You have Juwan Taylor, who's in his rookie contract, right tackle out of Florida. So that means with Luke Fortner and Tyler Shatley, who just got extended 2 years, Shatley's played center and guard. Fortner's played center and guard. So I think they've shored up the offensive line in Jacksonville. They went defensive end first overall instead of going for Ickey or Evan Neal, and I can understand that because in the third round they arguably, like I said, got a steal out of the SEC. The offensive line for Jacksonville is incredible when you look at what they have brought together. But like I said, you got your 2 tackles, you have your right guard in Brandon Sheriff, and now Tyler Shatley or Luke Fortner can be your left guard, and then whoever's not your left guard will be your center. So essentially, by drafting Luke Fortner and bringing in Brandon Sheriff, this team has their entire offensive line set and ready to go. They have 2 options at left guard and center, and then they have their right tackle, their left tackle, and their right guard already set and ready to go. So I love that. Brandon Sheriff went to Iowa for college, just to make note here, and Tyler Shatley went to Clemson, mind you here. So that means that the offensive line of the Jacksonville Jaguars is SEC, 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 Big 10, and it's so weird to look at Iowa and but so SEC, 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 Big 10, ACC. That is your offensive line for Jacksonville. Hopefully it pans out for them because on paper it should. Like I said, Chad Muma. Then they went SEC again with Snoop Connor, a running back out of Ole Miss in the 5th round. You're hoping Travis Etienne Jr. will be healthy and ready. He didn't have a rookie season, so technically this is his rookie year. Call him a redshirt freshman of the NFL, essentially, for the Jaguars. And obviously he provides a security blanket for Trevor Lawrence because they went to college together at Clemson, and I covered them both there. And then James Robinson, undrafted out of Illinois State, a fantastic player, 1,000-yard rusher for the Jaguars. And so you got 2 guys, Raekwell Armstead out of Temple you brought back, and Snoop Connor to be there for the team, at least in practice, to get them ready if your 2 guys are not fully healthy. Then out of Ouachita Baptist, which I didn't know was a school, corner, Jacksonville went Gregory Jr. in the 6th round, and in the 7th round, Montarique Brown out of Arkansas, another cornerback. So they're going to try and help out that secondary, which I understand because they've lost some players, and so that makes sense. You go linebacker, which I like because you got hybrid guys. You can now move to DNs. If you want to move Kayvon Chasen, you have Trayvon Walker, you have Josh Allen, and so you got some help there. You got some interior linebackers now. You got some other things you can do with linebackers, so we'll see what you do there. Miles Jack isn't on the team anymore, so we'll see how they shape that out. So I like the move at linebacker. I like the move at DN. I like that they got a center, and I like that a center/guard. I like that they waited, and they still got what looks to be, a potentially good offensive lineman here in the first pick of the 3rd round, and didn't have to go in the 1st or 2nd round to do that. And I like that they got another running back. Snoop, there it is, with Snoop Connor, and that you got 2 corners. So good picks by Jacksonville, and I've liked their picks in the last few years. Hopefully they'll pan out. I'm liking what Kansas City did. Kansas City went defense. They know they got offensive players, so they went defense with their first 2 picks, and I like them both in the 1st round. They traded up to get Trent McDuffie. They had picks 29 and 30, I believe. They got Trent McDuffie at 21, corner out of Washington, which I had him going around then. And then George Karlaftis out of Purdue at 30 at the end. And the guy that I thought they were going to get at 29, they still got in the 2nd round. So he went to the team I thought he would go to help them with the absence of Tyreek Hill, and he just went a little bit later. And so a big shout out to George Karlaftis, who is Sky Moore out of Western Michigan. Shout out to the head coach, Tim Lester, a good friend. Wide receiver Sky Moore foregoing his last year of eligibility to go to the draft, and it turns out good because he goes to the Kansas City Chiefs, and he has Pat Mahomes thrown to him now. Another Cincinnati player, Brian Cook, 2nd round of Cincinnati. That means he'll probably play. Love that they were high on him with a team that is a perennial playoff team. And then you have Leo Chenal, and I think he should be talking to Mike Sofka about it, I think he should be a cologne. What are you wearing? I'm wearing Leo Chanel. Wisconsin inside linebacker going in the third round. And then Joshua Williams out of Fayetteville State, not Fayetteville, New York, folks. A corner going in the fourth round. And so they brought in some help there at corner and safety, 3 players in the secondary. And then Darian Kennard out of Kentucky, offensive guard. They got 2 7th-round picks coming up here for Kansas City. So I like their defense, and I like that they got Sky Moore. And they got him a little bit later, but they still went out and got him. Chargers got Zion Johnson earlier than I thought he would go. I thought he'd go 26 to the Titans. He goes 17th to the Chargers. I thought the Chargers would go with Jameson Williams, but he went earlier. There was a total run on wide receivers, and so, opportunistic to protect Justin Herbert. They went Zion Johnson, who I covered out of BC, first round, 17th overall. JT Woods out of Baylor, hopefully help the team get out of the woods there defensively. Safety can help them out, and they had a shootout to try and get in the playoffs in the last game of the regular season and didn't make it. Hopefully JT Woods, safety out of Baylor, a third-round pick, can help them. They got Isaiah Spiller in the fourth round out of Texas A&M. Could be a steal here. Running back, because Austin Eckler I don't think was a household name. I don't think Darren Sproles was. And now Isaiah Spiller can hopefully help them out and become a household name himself. Otito Agbania out of UCLA, defensive tackle in round 5. And another Georgia player who I covered and interviewed, Jamari Saylor, offensive guard out of Georgia in the 6th round. The total run. How about this? Georgia and Cincinnati with a ton of players getting drafted in both teams in the college football playoff. Shows what exposure can do for you. Jasir Taylor out of Wake Forest. Corner went to in the 6th round there, went to the Chargers as well. And then we saw them go for another corner out of Ole Miss, Dean Leonard, in the 7th round. So we see a run on secondary players here by the Chargers to help them out. They went defense for all of their picks except for Jamari Saylor and Isaiah Spiller. Makes sense why they would do, and Zion Johnson. So you got 2 offensive guards and a running back. I can understand that. The Rams did not pick until the 3rd round, as the Rams have given up all their 1st and 2nd round draft capital for multiple years now because of the fact that they wanted to bring in a bunch of players and they had to make a bunch of moves to make that happen. So they went in the 3rd round, almost at the end of the 3rd. In the end, well, it was the end. I think it was a compensatory pick. So the Rams did not pick until the end of the 3rd round, seeing seeing like a full 3 rounds ahead of them. They went with offensive guard Logan Bruss to help to create some depth on the offensive line for Matt Stafford. Then they drafted in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds. 4th round, Jacoby Durant out of South Carolina State. Corner there. Kyron Williams, Notre Dame running back, could end up being some help there in their backfield. And then Quentin Lake out of UCLA, safety in the 6th round. Darian Kendrick out of Georgia at corner. A late pick, but pretty much everybody that was available to get drafted out of Georgia was. And then Daniel Hardy out of Montana State, outside linebacker. And 2 more 7th-round picks coming up for the Rams. The reigning Super Bowl champions went defense, 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 offensive guard, running back. So you can see what they're doing there. Kyron Williams hopefully will be able to make some hay out of Notre Dame, and they'll get some help. The Raiders, who were the host of this year's draft at their new stadium, New Digs, they also did not draft until the 3rd round, and they got Dylan Parham out of a team I cover and know all too well, offensive guard out of Memphis, and then they went and got another guy that I cover, Zamir White, out of Georgia, a running back who shared the backfield with James Cook this year. His number's not as good as the home run hitting James Cook. Zamir drafted in the 4th round, and with the Raiders not picking up the option for Josh Jacobs out of Alabama, I would imagine that Zamir White's got a big chance to make a big-time impression, and he was a 4th rounder. Another 4th rounder, Neil Farrell Jr. out of LSU, D-tackle, and then D-tackle Matthew Butler out of Tennessee went in the 5th round to the Raiders, and Thayer Munford out of OHIO, Ohio State offensive tackle, going there to potentially create some depth for the team. So they really leaned on, pretty balanced here. They went 2 offensive linemen, 2 defensive linemen, and a running back for the Raiders who didn't have a lot of picks this year. Miami Dolphins need all the help they can get. They did not pick until the third round either. So that's 3 teams in a row that we're examining. The Rams, the Raiders, and the Dolphins, none of them picked until the third round. And the Dolphins went with Channing Tindall out of Georgia. It's just cut and paste. Basically, every third player I mentioned is out of Georgia. And so inside linebacker, third round at the bottom part of it. And then in the fourth round, Eric Izukanma out of Texas Tech, wide receiver, going to Miami. And Cameron Good out of California, outside linebacker, in the seventh round. The Miami Dolphins had no draft capital because they gave up 1,000 picks to get Tyreek Hill out of Kansas City. So they had 1 third rounder, 1 fourth, and 2 seventh. And they still haven't picked the other one. So they only have 4 picks this year as they tried to build through acquisitions of players already in the NFL as opposed to draft. And Tua, still their quarterback. And hopefully Tua can stay healthy. Tua Tagovailoa. And hopefully he can do some good things. Because I'm a fan of Tua and a fan of his faith. And from him, coming from the great state of Hawaii. So I hope he pans out. Minnesota got a guy who I thought could go in the first round. They traded with the Detroit Lions, and they took their 32nd pick and got Lewis Cine out of Georgia, a safety there. I like that. Then in the second round, in the early part, they got another guy that I thought could be a first-round pick, Andrew Booth Jr. out of Clemson at corner. So you got a Georgia DB and a Clemson DB, not too shabby. Then they got offensive guard Ed Ingram in the second round out of LSU, and that going to the Minnesota Vikings to protect and help Delvin Cook and Kirk Cousins and company. Then they got Brian Asamoah out of Oklahoma, inside linebacker, at the beginning of the third round. And then they got Akalib Evans, a Missouri corner. So you see a bunch of secondary players for Minnesota. Esezi Mayo out of Minnesota, defensive end in the fifth round. Ty Chandler out of North Carolina, a running back in the fifth round, going to create some depth in Minnesota. And then they got Vidarian Lowe out of Illinois, offensive tackle in the sixth round. Jalen Naylor out of Michigan State, a wide receiver of merit here, coming in the sixth round to help out a team that already has Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. And then they got Nick Muse out of South Carolina at tight end in the seventh round. And we've seen them lose the likes of Kyle Rudolph and other players before him, as Minnesota is still looking for their tight end to shape up there. Yet another guy I thought would go in the first round in some of my mock draft thoughts, and that was Cole Strange, who I originally had out of Chattanooga. The Patriots pick him 29th overall, offensive guard there. The Patriots traded down. And then Tyquan Thornton in the second round out of Baylor, wide receiver. Some people thought they would go wide receiver. I think that, they normally don't go skill player in the first round, and it backfired on them. And N'Keal Harry hasn't really stayed healthy. Wide receiver they drafted recently in the first round. And Sony Michel isn't on the team anymore. He's on the Rams. And so he never panned out with the Patriots, was never consistent. So I understand them going offensive guard in the first round, and then going wide receiver in round number 2, since the skill players hasn't really worked out for him. I mean, you can't let one season affect your next season, just like your past girlfriend or boyfriend. You can't hold their sins on your new girlfriend or boyfriend. But I think the skill thing is kind of something they don't go for, and so they waited, and they got Tyquan Thornton. We'll see what Bill Belichick and Mac Jones, who I think is the right quarterback for the Patriots, and I told you he would start as a rookie, had a pretty good season, and put them in a good position to vie for the playoffs. Wide receiver Tyquan Thornton hopefully will get a good relationship with Mac Jones out of Baylor. Marcus Jones out of Houston, another guy I covered. Corner, third round, getting picked by the Patriots. Love it. Hope he gets out there and plays. Jack Jones out of Arizona State, a corner. So you got 2 Joneses out of 2 different places, 2 different parts of the country, both going to be corners on the Patriots. Fourth round for Jack Jones. Fourth round, 3 picks for the Patriots. So the next one, Pierre Strong Jr. out of South Dakota State, a running back. And Baylor Zappi out of Western Kentucky, a quarterback to help out Mac Jones and push him there. Kevin Harris out of South Carolina, they get another running back late. So again, getting skill guys in the first round backfired on the Patriots. So their response, to wait. And in waiting, they got a wide receiver in the second, and a running back in the 4th and in the 6th round. Sam Roberts, a Northwest Missouri State D tackle in the 6th round, and Chasen Hines out of LSU, an offensive guard in the 6th round, and Andrew Stuber, Michigan offensive guard. So we saw 3 offensive guards go to the Patriots, who obviously think they need help on the O-line, 2 running backs and a wide receiver, 2 corners on the team, and a quarterback and a D tackle, and another rich draft. I think Cole Strange can end up being one of the steals of the draft because it's Bill Belichick, and he's typically smarter than everybody else. The Saints traded up from the mid-teens to get to the high, to get to 11 here, and they drafted Chris Olave, and I thought Garrett Wilson would go 10, Chris Olave would go number 11. Garrett Wilson went 10 to the Jets. Chris Olave went 11. I thought he would go to the Commanders. The Commanders and the Saints traded. Chris Olave still went with his teammate back-to-back, still in the position I thought. And then in the first round, they got Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa, offensive tackle at number 19. I thought he'd fall a little bit. And then Alontae Taylor in the second round out of Tennessee, a corner to help out their defense. It needs all the help it can get. DeMarco Jackson out of Appalachian State, inside linebacker in the 5th round. And out of Air Force, I love seeing the military teams go, D tackle Jordan Jackson in round number 6. So the Saints didn't have a lot of picks. They only had 5. But I definitely think Trevor Penning and Chris Olave can help them out right away. And their wide receiver core was severely depleted last year. The Giants kept both of their top 7 picks. They kept Kayvon, and so they got the 5th and the 7th. Kayvon Thibodeau fell to them, which I thought he might. They got him and Evan Neal. So you get a starting D-end, and you get an offensive tackle that can help you out immediately. You get an Oregon guy who's got an ego, which is why I didn't want him for Jacksonville. And you have Evan Neal out of Alabama, who I interviewed and definitely appreciated his time and his maturity that he showed here. So I think, automatically, I've said the Giants have needed to help their offensive line for multiple years now. And with the Evan Neal pick, I feel like they finally have listened. And I think that, this is one that can pan out. And hopefully Kayvon Thibodeau will pan out too, and that ego will hopefully subside, and we can see him be a team player. I just didn't like my first impression of him. That's what I took. Wendell Robinson out of Kentucky, a wide receiver, coming early in the 2nd round. I definitely think he could be a huge help to them. They don't have any household names at wide receiver, so the Giants need that help. Joshua Ezeudu out of North Carolina, offensive guard, early part of the 3rd round, 3rd pick of the 3rd round. And Cordell Flott out of LSU at corner. And then Daniel Bellinger, San Diego State tight end. They need help at tight end. They just lost Evan Engram to the Jaguars. Dane Belton out of Iowa, safety in the 4th round. And in the 5th round, they had 3 picks. Micah McFadden out of Indiana, inside linebacker. DJ Davidson out of Arizona State, D tackle. Marcus McKeithen out of North Carolina, an offensive guard. So look at this. They got 2 offensive guards from North Carolina, 2 teammates to help them out on the offensive line. They got 3 offensive linemen in the draft and a tight end. Definitely see that the Giants may finally be listening to me. And then they went out and got my guy as a steal of the draft in round number 6 at the top of the 6th round. 3rd pick of the 6th round, Darian Beavers out of Cincinnati, inside linebacker. So a lot of defense, a lot of offensive line help. Totally understand all of this, and a wide receiver for the Giants, who I think if these pan out, they definitely went position-wise the way they should. And then we go to the New York Jets, who I think arguably had the best first day of the draft, if not the first couple days. They might end up being the winner of the draft. And I correctly predicted their first 3 picks of the draft, and I said they were the first team in the 2nd round that I thought Breece Hall would go to. I got asked by one of our longtime listeners and viewers, Greg, and Greg said to me, where do you think Breece Hall will go since he didn't go in the 1st round? And I said to him, I didn't think he would go the first few picks of the 2nd round because the teams just weren't teams that needed a running back. So I said, this is where I think he could go. I named off the teams, and the first team that I thought he could go to were the Jets. Basically, all the teams ahead of the Jets had what they needed, in my opinion. And so I said, the first team I could see taking Breece Hall are the Jets. I'm a Jaguar fan in the comfort of my own home. This is a shade of green, teal, And obviously the other shade of green, Forest, which, I think I would call it Forest that the Jets have. Apparently, I did well with another shade of green, and maybe it's having a best friend in Ross Turetsky that, is such a big Jets fan that maybe he rubbed off on me that as close as I am to him, I somehow became close to the Jets because I accurately predicted their first 3 picks and said they would be the first team that would look at taking Breece Hall in the second round. So technically the first 4 picks I had right, and then I didn't look at their other picks, or maybe I could have had them all. Who knows? It seemed like this was my year to play the numbers in the lottery for the Jets. So they got my guy Ahmad Sauce Gardner out of Cincinnati. They one of 9 Cincinnati players drafted and the highest one, 4th overall. Then they went out and got Garrett Wilson, who I predicted to go 10th in out of Ohio State, wide receiver. Then they traded back into the first round, 26th overall. And that was a Titans pick, I believe. Got Jermaine Johnson, the second that I predicted out of Florida State at DN that I interviewed. Then they got Breece Hall, Iowa State, out of running back there. Another person that I called in that respect. And then in the third round, they got Jeremy Ruckert out of Ohio State. Tight end, they just lost their tight end, so it makes sense. Max Mitchell out of Louisiana at O-tackle, help you out on the line. And Michael Clemens out of Texas A&M, a DN. They didn't have... So in this draft, the Jets had enough picks. I should say they had enough. They had 7 total picks, and all of those picks were in the top 4 rounds. That, to me, is intelligent. You got 3 picks in the first round, a pick in the second, a pick in the third, and 2 in the fourth. Huge shout-outs to the New York Jets, who I think, again, may have had the best draft, and they got their picks done early, and their first 4 picks that they drafted are all guys that I thought made total sense on their team. So nice to think that we thought alike, Jets. I think they went from literally the basement of the AFC East, obscurity, to being relevant. I think arguably the best players they have on their team might be guys that they drafted, in all honesty, this year. And you're watching the Wake Up Call live draftcast in day 3 of the draft. As the draft rounds out, I am giving you my thoughts on every single one of the 32 franchises, not missing a single team. We have just a few left. The Philadelphia Eagles, Jordan Davis. I thought Jordan Davis would go 14th overall to the Ravens, and the Eagles traded up to get Jordan Davis right before the Ravens could. And if you are a fan of the draft and you know draft history, the Eagles did the exact same thing to the Cowboys a few seasons ago when you thought Dallas Goedert was going to go to the Dallas Cowboys, and the Eagles traded up 1 pick to take him over the Cowboys. They did the same thing with the Ravens this year, in my opinion, and in Jeff Cook's opinion. Georgia D-tackle Jordan Davis, who I covered as well in the college football playoff, going to the Eagles, who don't have a scary defense. Now hopefully they can have some type of a defense to write home about. So, like I said, we see the Jets going after Jordan Davis here. Or pardon me, the Eagles going after Jordan Davis. I'm looking at the same shade of green. So the Eagles are going after Jordan Davis, and then in the second round they went Cameron Jurgens, Nebraska center, so to help out their offensive line and protect their quarterback, who some people scratched their head why they drafted him, and now he's their guy. It's like why did they draft him, and then he ends up being their guy. Speaking about Jalen Hurts, so Jalen Hurts playing in 2 different places, playing in Alabama and Oklahoma, and seeing him move forward. Then they got a steal in the third round. In the middle of the third round, they got Nakobe Dean, inside linebacker out of Georgia. I had him as my second linebacker off the board, outside of Devin Lloyd, who went to the Jaguars. Kyron Johnson, another inside linebacker, 6th round out of Kansas. And then in the 6th round, they also went with Grant Calcaterra out of SMU, a tight end there out of SMU. So I definitely can appreciate them doing that. So big ups to the Philadelphia Eagles. I like what the Eagles did. I really do. They went D-line, inside linebacker, tight end out of SMU, a team that I cover, and center. So you helped out your defense. You did something to help out your quarterback with your center and your tight end. So I like what they did there. I think Philadelphia had a pretty good draft. Pittsburgh Steelers went with the first quarterback off the board, and Al Romano and I have only waited more than half a year for this pick to happen. Kenny Pickett, Pitt to Pitt, Pitt Panthers to the Pitt Steelers. And then in the second round, they went with George Pickens, and him going out of Georgia, wide receiver. I thought he would go the latter part of the first round. He ends up going to the Steelers. I like this in the latter part of the second round. I think that's another guy that can shape up to be a starter. They don't have Juju anymore. They haven't had Antonio Brown in seasons. James Washington hasn't stepped up out of Washington like he should. And so I think George Pickens could be the 1 or 2 guy right away for their team, for the Steelers. And then DeMarvin Leal out of Texas A&M, a third-round defensive end, makes a lot of sense here. And then the Steelers go and get another one of my guys, Calvin Austin III, who falls in the fourth round, wide receiver out of Memphis. Interviewed him going into the season about NIL and all that. Big ups to Calvin Austin. They go with 2 receivers and a quarterback and a fullback, and then they take another quarterback, Chris Oladokun, out of South Dakota State, to round out the draft in the 7th round. So they went offense throughout the whole draft except for 2 picks, with DeMarvin Leal in the 3rd round, D-end out of Texas A&M, and out of Ole Miss, Mark Robinson, outside linebacker. So the Steelers definitely want to address their offensive woes with their era, believe it or not, sans Ben Roethlisberger. So Connor Hayward, Michigan State fullback, going to the team as well. And I'm excited to see what they can do. You know, unlike the Packers, who waited, you know, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they got after it at wide receiver. And they got 2 guys that I think we can see, you know, in these first, definitely George Pickens, hopefully Calvin Austin this year. If not this year, maybe next year. And I think that ultimately there's going to be a lot of help coming here for these teams. You know, for the Steelers. I think the Steelers got help at wide receiver, and I like what they did. I like that the Steelers focused on offense, and I think it'll help them out. I mean, remember, no Antonio Brown, no James Conner, no Le'Veon Bell, no Juju Smith-Schuster, no Ben Roethlisberger. The next era for Pittsburgh is now, and it's looking bright with George Pickens and Kenny Pickett, and, you know, maybe a Calvin Austin shaping out as well. The Seattle Seahawks went with a guy that was on a bunch of draft boards in the top 10, including mine, Al Romano's, and Jeff Cook's. Charles Cross out of Mississippi State, 9th overall, going offensive tackle. I thought they might go Desmond Ridder at some point later in the draft in the 2nd round, but they end up going offensive tackle. I get it there. And then they go with Boye Mafe out of Minnesota in the early part of the 2nd round. We saw Seattle with the 40th and 41st pick. They go Boye Mafe, outside linebacker. Then they go Kenneth Walker III, addressing their giant gaping issue of a running back that they've had since Marshawn Lynch was there. And Marshawn Lynch was brought back. They still had issues when he came back. So they haven't had a good running back in forever. Now they have Kenneth Walker III, who had over 1,600 yards from scrimmage this season, to be 2nd overall in all of college football as 130 FBS teams, running back out of Michigan State in the 41st overall pick. Abraham Lucas, Washington State O-tackle in the 3rd round. So we see them go offensive tackle, outside linebacker, running back, offensive tackle, addressing a lot of the offense. Then they go to the Legion of Boom, trying to help out here. They get a steal, in my opinion, in Kobe Bryant with a C, who wore number 8 in the college football playoff to honor Kobe Bryant, Kobe, in the college football playoff. That's Kobe Bryant, Coby, out of Cincinnati, corner in the 4th round. Early part of the 4th round, 4th pick of the 4th round, going to Cincinnati. And out of UTSA, corner Tariq Woolen, going in the 5th round to Seattle. Then Tyreek Smith out of Ohio State, D-end. And then they go wide receivers, take a chance on 2 guys, Bo Melton out of Rutgers and Derek Young out of Lenoir-Rhyne, which I didn't know was a college, in the 7th round. So 2 7th-round wide receivers. They figured, why not? Let's see what we can get from our receivers here. We have DK Metcalf. You know, they have the help that they need at wide receiver for Seattle. So I'm not worried about Seattle wide receiver. I'm worried about who's throwing to him. Right now it's Drew Lock. It's really, you know, Drew Lock, maybe Geno Smith. And that's where the Seattle Seahawks are at quarterback right now. Geno Smith and Drew Lock. So you have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, and then you bring in a couple other guys, you see what you could do. Dwayne Eskridge, another wide receiver like Sky Moore coming from Western Michigan, and he's going into his second season in the NFL with the Seattle Seahawks, that being Dwayne Eskridge. So I'm excited to see what Seattle can do here, and I'm happy they addressed running back and offensive tackle as well as corner. I love that they got Kobe Bryant and Kenneth Walker III. Last four teams, San Francisco, second-round pick. They went with Drake Jackson, USC outside linebacker, in a defense that really was depleted during Corona, and so we can say that much. And then in the third round, they went with Tyrion Davis Price, LSU running back, as they've had a lot of injuries to running backs out there. And then out of SMU, another team that I cover here, and I mentioned them before, and I mentioned Cortland Sutton as well, Danny Gray, wide receiver out of SMU, going to a team that allegedly has an entrenched receiver that's not happy, Deebo Samuel. And then we see another UTSA player going, Spencer Burford out of offensive tackle, going in the fourth round to San Francisco. And Samuel Womack out of Toledo, a fifth-round cornerback, going there to the Niners. And then Nick Zakelj out of Fordham offensive tackle. And then a guy that I interviewed this past season, Kalia Davis, I think it's Kalia Davis, pardon me, out of UCF, a D tackle, going to the San Francisco 49ers. I hope he makes the team, and I hope he makes a lot of hay in the NFL, and I hope he stays in the NFL for a really long time. Big fan of Davis out of UCF, Kalia Davis, who I talked with Dylan Gabriel earlier on in the season. And if you're wondering, I don't normally eat on the air, but my girlfriend is off camera, and I think she's eating all of our Reese's eggs because she's ready to eat, and I think she is trying to give me a hint that's not so subtle. So I think she's getting back at me by eating all the Reese's eggs right now. And she will not eat the Cadbury eggs because she already had 2 and there's only 4 in the box. But Tariq Castro Fields, Penn State corner, 6th round, and they still have another pick coming in the 7th round. Please go find, there is a bag of candy. You know, I love this woman, but she got to figure it out. So out of Tampa, I'm appalled at what's happening off the air right now. Out of Tampa, second round, first pick of the second round was supposed to be the Jaguars, but they traded for 27th. Logan Hall out of Houston, another team I cover there. Defensive end, going to Tampa to help out a defense that's already had success. And 2 years ago, when Tom Brady and that squad won a Super Bowl, there wasn't enough credit given to the defense for helping them do that, as he threw 3 interceptions there. The second round, they also had the 25th pick. Luke Godecki out of Central Michigan, offensive tackle out of the MAC, to help them out. They lost Alex Kappa, a guard, to the Bengals. And then Rashad White out of Arizona State, a running back that Mike Sofka and I mentioned going into the draft in the third round, latter part of the third round. Big-time pickup there, as he will back up Leonard Fournette. As we have seen with Leonard Fournette being out there, Leonard Fournette was splitting time in the backfield with a former draft pick that was drafted high by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they parted ways with him. And we see, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers parting ways, as we see what's happened with Leonard Fournette, that, they didn't have to rely on somebody else that they had brought into it. And, seeing what Leonard Fournette had done with the team, seeing Leonard Fournette's work and seeing what he had put forward, they knew that they could give up what they had there. And they knew that, ultimately it wasn't going to work out with another guy that they drafted. And it was kind of ironic hearing this guy that they had picked up and a guy that they had drafted, Ronald Jones II, because there was the talk in camp that Ronald Jones, when he was a rookie, wasn't going to make the team as high as he was drafted because they said he wasn't understanding the playbook. And so that's interesting. But now they have a guy to back up Leonard Fournette, who they just gave a 3-year contract to after giving him 2 1-year deals as he came out of his rookie contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So after that, we have Cade Otton out of Washington, a tight end there, a first pick of the 4th round. Excited to see what he can do as they lost O.J. Howard, and we'll see if they have Rob Gronkowski. Jake Camarda out of Georgia, their punter, drafted early, so obviously they're looking at him to be their starting punter. I think that's 3 punters that went in the 4th and 5th round collectively. Zion McCollum,
Verizon is going
Sam
ultra
Houston,
with 5G
cornerback there
ultra
in the 5th
wideband
round,
in many more
and then
cities.
Ko Keith,
Mindy, with up to
out of
10 times
Minnesota,
faster
another
speeds,
tight end,
she
going
can
2 tight
download a
ends
movie
here.
in minutes
See
or a
what
song
works.
in seconds.
And then in the 7th round, they got
Verizon is going
Andre
ultra,
Anthony
so
out of
you can
LSU,
do
a
more.
defensive end. So we saw the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the unretired Tom Brady, which I didn't think he would retire, and nor did Joe Theismann. And Joe Theismann broke that on my show, spoke about the fact that he didn't think Tom had enough time and he didn't think he was necessarily done. 4 hours after he said it, Tom said he didn't know if he would be done. Then he retired, and then he unretired after he had some time to think about it. As Theismann said,
a lot of conversation around
Tom's a
you
guy
versus
who
Derek
takes his
Stingley
time,
Jr., but why should a
and he's
team
not a
choose
guy
you?
that's going to make a quick
I feel like I'm
decision.
the best.
And
I do little
ultimately,
things right. I study
when
the
he
game
had
a
time to
lot.
think about it,
You know what
he
I'm
didn't
saying?
retire.
I'm a
And
sponge.
so Joe Theismann was
I
right,
like being
and
able to
I don't
take
think Tom
information
Brady's
from
going to ever
everybody.
retire because I
I
think
just
he's going
feel like
to
ultimately,
continue
I'm the
just
best.
harass the
And I know how
NFL
to
for as long as
dominate
he's
whoever line up in
alive.
front of me.
And that's okay
Best
because
sauce in
he
the
is
world.
the GOAT, and I
So
can
I say
admit that
barbecue.
now. So Tampa going 2 defensive linemen, 1 offensive lineman, 2 tight ends, a punter, a running back, and a corner. So they were kind of all over the place. And so an early offensive tackle, an earlier running back, and I think, Cade Otton's trying to help out O.J. Howard being gone to the Bills, and Logan Hall at defensive end out of Houston. They're trusting him. And speaking of the Bills, another defensive lineman, Ed Oliver from Houston. So shout out to the fantastic American Athletic Conference who keeps sending guys to the NFL. I talked about Tennessee and how they traded away A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown had 3 strong seasons. Didn't play a full season this past season. If he did, he probably would have had 3,000-yard seasons in 3 seasons. It looked like they didn't want to pay him because they had his effort and they had his ability, and it looked like ultimately they just didn't want to give him the money. So they trade him on the first night during the first round. They trade A.J. Brown where they know what they had for Treylon Burks where they don't know what they're getting out of Arkansas. So this just looks like, hey, we used a guy for 3 years. He did a fantastic job, and now we don't want to pay him. So we'll go use this new guy for 3 years, and if he does a good job, we'll just go find another guy. So they're just kind of renting. They're essentially not buying a TV or a couch. They're renting from like Aaron's, which is that place you can rent from. So it's kind of like they're never going to buy a house. They're just going to keep leasing an apartment. And then the second round, the early part of the second round, the 3rd pick of the second round, Roger McCreary, quarterback out of Auburn. If you guys can only know the life that I have to live. Roger McCreary going to Tennessee, who needs help in their corners. Nicholas Petit-Frere out of Ohio State, offensive tackle, to help out Ryan Tannehill, and the guy that they traded up for, Malik Willis, who they got after that in the 3rd round out of Liberty. He falls to the 3rd round, could end up being their guy of the future, I would imagine, as Ryan Tannehill it probably is going to play this season and maybe a season after this, but shout out to them. Miami didn't have him healthy, and Miami didn't really seem like they knew what to do with him when he was healthy, and then he goes to Tennessee, and he becomes one of the top 10 fantasy quarterbacks, in my opinion, a couple seasons ago. And now Malik Willis, by the numbers, he spent his first 2 seasons at Auburn. He only attempted 7 passes in each of those 2 years, and then he transferred to Liberty in 2020, 64.2% completion percentage, 2,250 yards passing, 20 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, 141 carries, 944 yards, 6.7 yards a carry, 14 rushing touchdowns. And in 2021, 61.1% completion percentage, 28 57 passing yards, 2,857, 27 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 197 carries, 878 yards, 4.5 yards a carry, and 14 rushing touchdowns. The man has been absolutely phenomenal. In the last 2 years combined, he has 47 passing touchdowns and 28 rushing touchdowns, which gives him a total of 75 touchdowns to 18 interceptions in 2 seasons of running the ball with 4.5 yards a carry, 6.7 yards a carry, which averages out to over 5 yards a carry, which is more than halfway to a first down, and almost 900 yards and almost 1,000 yards rushing in the last 2 seasons. Malik Willis, who could be a project, but ultimately getting himself onto the Tennessee Titans. Could you imagine a world where Derrick Henry stays in the NFL for another 4 years, Malik Willis is his quarterback for a couple years, and you have Malik Willis running an option-style offense with Mike Vrabel being a fantastic coach, and you have their awesome coaching where they won without Derrick Henry, became the number 1 seed in the playoffs without Derrick Henry, and did a tremendous job to stave off the Bills and the Chiefs and the Patriots without Derrick Henry. Can you imagine a team, even just for 2 seasons, where Malik Willis and Derrick Henry get to run the ball together in the same backfield? Awesome. So I'm definitely excited for that and what can come from that. Then in the 4th round, I'm going straight to heaven. Then in the 4th round, Hassan Haskins out of Michigan, another running back there for backup status. And then Chigozium Okonkwo out of Maryland, tight end, 4th round. They've needed some help without Delanie Walker and company, who had finished up at Tennessee. I thought Delanie had some more time, and he's gone. Theo Jackson out of Tennessee, safety, so the Titans get to keep a Tennessee player in Tennessee. Theo Jackson, a 6th round pick. Kyle Phillips, I skipped him here, I don't know why. Kyle Phillips, a 5th round pick, a UCLA wide receiver. And obviously they just got rid of A.J. Brown. And they let go of Julio Jones. That was a test that never worked, as Julio has not been able to stay healthy.
With more
for
rental
the
listings
last,
than anybody else,
years
it was
at
just
least.
inevitable.
And then they went and got
everything
Theo
you were looking for on
Jackson
apartments.com.
out of Tennessee, like I said. And in the 6th round, they got
in-unit
Chance
laundry,
Campbell out
free
of Ole
parking,
Miss,
and
inside
central
linebacker.
AC.
So they really didn't go defense
Apartments.com,
in this
the
draft.
place to find a
We
place.
saw the Tennessee Titans pick 3 defensive players, and then they went, as far as offense goes, they went with 6 offensive players, and I think that any one of them can help the team out immediately. The final team that we have to talk about here, for a very impatient person off the air, Jahan Dotson going to the Washington Commanders. I thought Jahan Dotson would go a pick later to Philadelphia, and instead he goes right around. And see, some people thought that I was picking him too high. He goes 16 overall, out of Penn State, to the Washington Commanders. Jahan Dotson, one of the early receivers, one of the first 6 receivers off the board. And then my guy, Phidarian Mathis, who I interviewed right where I'm sitting right now. Phil Mathis out of Alabama, D tackle, went in the 2nd round early on. Another guy I interviewed who gets to stay with his teammate in Washington, from Alabama to the nation's capital, Brian Robinson Jr. out of Alabama.
Verizon is going ultra
going in the late round
with
of the,
5G
going
ultra
the late
wideband
part
in
of
many
the
more
3rd round.
cities.
Loving that
Mindy,
pick for
with
Washington.
up to 10 times
I
faster
think he can
speeds,
play right
she can
away.
download a movie in minutes or a song
Then
in
Percy
seconds.
Butler out of
Yep.
Louisiana.
Verizon
safety in
is
the
going
4th round.
ultra, so
First
you can
pick
do more.
of the 5th round, this man fell. I didn't buy into the Heisman hype, but I really hope. I mean, he could still end up being the quarterback of the future. As much as I didn't see the Heisman hype over the last couple seasons, and that has to do, too, with watching how he played against Syracuse's defense a couple seasons ago in 2020, Sam Howell leaned on his rushing attack. Let's see what he can do here in Washington with an opportunity. Carson Wentz is there on his 3rd team in 3 years, so we'll see if Sam Howell can be the eventual starter for North Carolina. I hope to God that he has a fantastic career in the NFL. And as much as I didn't see the hype for Heisman, that doesn't mean that he can't turn around and be a fantastic 10 to 12-year starter. I hope that the Commanders got a guy who we talked about as one of the 6 quarterbacks that I thought would be drafted in this year's draft of note. And I'm hoping that Sam Howell will definitely do some good things here to create some success for the future of Washington, as the Commanders didn't have a name for the last 2 years. They didn't really have a quarterback either. Cole Turner, Nevada tight end in the 5th round. And then out of Tulsa, another offensive lineman, another Tulsa player, Chris Paul, same name as the guy that you know from the Phoenix Suns, offensive guard in the 7th round. And then Christian Holmes rounds out the draft for the Commanders, Oklahoma State corner that they got in the 7th round. So they go a little bit all over the place. They address some defense and some offense. And ultimately, I think it's good for Washington. You get a receiver that can help you out, and you get a receiver in Jahan Dotson that can be an accent to what you already have out there. When you look at your team that you have with these Washington Commanders, you already have Terry McLaurin out of Ohio State and Curtis Samuel. You bring in Jahan Dotson, and if you have the right quarterback between Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, and I don't think Sam Howell is going to start right away, but if you can find the right guy, then you could have 3 productive receivers. And Antonio Gibson, one of the many players out of Memphis who is very relevant, he helps the team out. And J.D. McKissick, if he can stay healthy, does as well. And we'll see what Logan Thomas can do. I like Ron Rivera. I can't believe the Carolina Panthers got rid of him after he was Coach of the Year. And I'm excited to see what they'll bring to the table with some much-needed offensive help. So they need the right quarterback, but I think they got some weapons at receiver. With that being said, this is a live draft cast on day 3 of all 32 franchises in one place. Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. We look forward to talking with you soon. And as always, God bless, no stress. Do your best. Let's go, Jags! I'll talk with you all soon. Be safe, be well. To all the 32 franchises, I wish you my absolute best. And find us on Facebook at Wake Up Call DT, Twitter at Call DT, and Instagram at WakeUpCall_DT. In the meantime, be safe, be well, be good to each other, and keep God first.